Welcome back to the Leadership Blueprint Growth Podcast. Today I'm joined by Sophie Warrick, co-CEO and co-founder of The Thoughtful Company and a leading voice in gender equality and workplace inclusion. After starting her career leading employee resource groups in structural engineering and co-founding Women in Consulting Engineering, Sophie now partners with employers to turn DEI from theory into measurable business impact, improving retention, performance, and profitability by building truly equitable workplaces. Sophie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Jordan.
Of course. So, how would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, so at the Thoughtful Co, we do two key things. One, advise employers of building more equitable workplaces. Within that, it could be things like implementing employee resource groups, parental leave programs, sponsorship and mentorship programs, looking both at the policy work, but also committees and initiatives that organizations can implement. And then the second piece of what we do is we coach individuals in compensation negotiation. So specifically, we work with women at all stages of their career, but often we work with executives. And so that could be performance reviews, promotions, new job offers, or just anytime someone wants to talk about compensation with their leader.
Gotcha. What originally led you into performance psychology or at least leadership consulting? Was there a defined moment in your timeline where you said, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, or this is the new path for me?
A little bit. So I started my career in structural engineering. So I was a consultant working in the design of residential high-rise buildings, which is quite different than what I do today. And I found working in quite a male-dominated industry, I sometimes saw opportunities both on the organizational side to build more inclusive spaces, but I co-founded a nonprofit in 2018 called Women in Consulting Engineering and met lots of women working in the industry through that organization who were either leaving the firms they were at or the industry entirely because they weren't getting the right support they needed or weren't finding the right environment to be most successful and were seeking it elsewhere. And so I kind of felt a little bit conflicted because I'd spent so much of my career trying to keep women in the engineering profession. And ultimately, I am someone who left. But I think of it as for the greater good because my work now is focused on supporting leadership teams in building more successful organizations and then also supporting individuals and helping them stay at their organizations more long term and reach those more senior positions. So I think it was a lot driven by my own personal experience and gaps that I was seeing and an opportunity to try and support people like myself in staying and growing in their careers.
On the note of helping individuals and companies, do you have any frameworks or methods you like to utilize when working with these organizations?
Yeah, so if we're working with employers, often what we like to do, if it's the first time that we're working with a new client, we do what we like to call as like a DEI health check. And so we're looking at their policies and programs, initiatives. Often we like to pair that with focus groups as well. So we can get a better understanding of the employee experience and look for any opportunities to support. And really our goal is, I know the term DEI has been really charged in the last couple of years, but it's really about employee experience and engagement. Like everyone wants to show up at work as their true selves and be able to just focus on performing their role. And that's really our focus too. So our framework around that health check is really understanding the organizational needs and goals and also understanding where they are. When I worked in engineering, sometimes we had DEI consultants come in and they would recommend these fantastic programs that I was personally very aligned with. But it was so far from where the industry was. It was just not accessible to the company. It ultimately just fell flat. So our focus is very much on meeting companies where they are and recommending accessible but ambitious goals for them. And so we typically categorize from one, two, three. So one being that sort of easy, low hanging fruit. We don't need a lot of time, resources, or change management to think about implementing it. And then all the way up to three, where it's maybe a goal for a couple of years from now. We need to think more about it, or we're only going to focus on one or two of those initiatives on a given year. So a big part of our initial focus is just really understanding the company and then finding programs, policies, and initiatives that will really allow them to meet their goals. And so even if we find ourselves working with one of their competitors across the street, we might end up recommending quite different policies because their culture is different and their operational structure is different.
Gotcha. Can you give us an example of what that would look like in a real world situation?
Yeah, exactly. So typically, if we're meeting a new company, we would start off first by doing a full policy review of all of their programs. We would then meet a few key members of their team. We like to meet folks from all different levels. We don't want to just be talking to senior leadership. We just want to make sure we're working with folks at all levels, but also in different departments too. So we're speaking to different employee experience. And then we compile all of those results together and build that into a report recommending, here's the current state, understanding where they are today, and then our recommendations for key programs to implement. So it's a really clear cut path to chip away at. So it might be, for example, implementing an employee resource group, or it could be a sponsorship program or a parental leave policy.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Do you have any specific like case studies or client examples where you did work with the employers, implemented some policies, and the workplace was thrilled about the change?
Yeah, one that I'm personally really excited about is just from this past fall. We were working with a company called ISL Engineering, and they're a large engineering company, and they had wanted to revamp their parental leave policy. So they wanted to provide some sort of top up structure, but they also wanted to make sure they were providing something that really spoke to the needs of their employees. So one part that was really exciting about that is we spent quite a bit of time conducting focus groups with members of their team who some folks had taken parental leaves in the past, either at other organizations or with them. So we're kind of past that phase of their life, but had sort of insights from when they went through it. Some folks who were about to take parental leave or who are actively on it. And then some folks who were thinking about it for future years. So we're trying to get a breadth of those experiences. And one thing that was really interesting through it is, of course, we talked a lot about the top up and the financial accessibility of it, but we also talked a lot about the challenges of the return to work and supporting employees when they came back to work. So accessibility and cost of childcare and flexibility, being able to maybe their team typically worked in office 5 days a week, but someone might need some flexibility around that. So we've also spent a lot of time structuring that return to work experience, as well as providing that financial support while someone was on leave. And it was really exciting because it was so well received by employees because it was speaking directly to their needs versus someone's assumption of what they need. And that can be a challenge, especially for large organizations when those decisions are maybe made by leadership or HR teams who, especially folks who might no longer be in that phase of their lives, it can be really driven by, personal assumptions. But when you can really hear from what people need and what people need today, then you can tailor a program that's really meets and or exceeds employees' needs. So I was really excited about that one.
Where do you find that companies, I guess, give you pushback on this?
Yeah,
Or where do they challenge your beliefs, if that makes sense?
it's an interesting question. I find, often we are hired or retained by a number of folks who are already so bought in to what we're doing and they just need someone to implement it. So that's fantastic. But typically there's people within the organization who are maybe not, in that same mindset. And it's often I find like I think a big challenge, and this has come up so much in the last year, is the pushback and discomfort around the word meritocracy. Like I think that is the biggest pushback we get in the work that we do because people who don't necessarily understand what we're doing think that we're advocating for hiring, promoting, or compensating someone exclusively because of their identity, which is not at all what we stand for. And it's interesting because meritocracy is this concept that we're going to move people into positions of power and influence because of their demonstrated expertise, abilities, and merits. And that's fantastic. I completely agree with that. The challenge with meritocracy is if you don't also understand your personal biases, you're not able to make merit-based decisions. And there was a great study shared in the book Invisible Women by Carolyn Criado Perez, which studies a lot of different gender data gaps across the world. But this one particular section was talking about meritocracy. And she was sharing a study that I believe was conducted at the Harvard Business School, which found that individuals who believed in their own personal objectivity, so essentially were unaware of personal biases, were much more likely to hire a male candidate than an identically described female candidate. So the irony is that people that believed in meritocracy were less able to make merit-based decisions.
Mhm.
And so my belief really is that no one wants meritocracy more than the people who are continuously systematically disadvantaged. I want to get a role or be promoted because I'm a woman. I want to get it because I'm the best. But if we don't acknowledge the biases in the past history, as well as if, we have leaderships that are teams that are consistently majority men, we're going to make those same biased decisions over and over again, and we won't be finding the best people for the role. So I think a lot of the pushback I get is trying to better understand what meritocracy is and how we actually achieve it. And so when I think of things like affirmative action, which is also quite a charged word right now, I'm never advocating unless I haven't come across it yet, but perhaps there are certain situations where it makes sense, but I'm typically never advocating for let's hire this person because of their identity. What I want to do is introduce clear objectivity in the decision making. So I maybe don't want to close the candidate pool that take down the job posting until we get this percentage or this number of folks from this equity denied group that we're trying to hire for. So I'm at least making sure there's equity in the candidate pool. And maybe I'm going to try and make sure that my interview panel is diverse and it's not just one uniform identity. So at least there's objectivity in that decision making. And then maybe I'm also going to recommend that each of those panelists who are conducting the interview make their recommendations privately and submit to some third party before discussing together, where we might have confirmation bias at play. So those are the types of things that I'm recommending. But I think people get afraid and sort of go to that extreme where they think, oh, I'm just going to hire this person because they have that identity and they're not going to be the best.
Thank you for all those insights. I really appreciate that. No, you're good. I guess personally speaking, I really don't care about, where your background is, or maybe I'm gonna, cancel myself by saying all of this, but I'm a very results-oriented person. So again, I don't care what your background is, where you come from, color of your skin, obviously. If you can do the job and you're the best, you're hired. Like that's all I care about is results. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on the matter.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like really being results oriented.
For sure. Now, how do most of your clients find you today?
A lot is from client referrals, we find. We do like a little bit of marketing, but I really find a lot of it is from past connections referring us. We have such good relationships with our past clients, and many of them continue to work with us for years to come. So that's really fantastic because, yeah, we get to build a lot of great trusted relationships.
That's awesome. When you were first starting your practice, this goes for other leadership consulting firms. Were there any specific strategies you utilized to land your first couple of engagements?
Yeah, I think two things that we leveraged a lot were one, like really, and maybe this won't be relevant in all industries, but for us, like really pushing for in-person connection. That was such a big driver in our ability to land those first clients because, especially we do work with a lot of folks in engineering and construction. And so that industry is more in-person oriented. I think when you don't have the years of experience behind your business, people need to trust you. You are the brand in the beginning. So being able to build that rapport with people. And so being able to meet those first clients in person was really helpful. And we don't need to leverage that as much today because we have testimonials and we have client case studies and we have referrals. But in the beginning, you don't have all of those things. You really just need to get someone to trust you. So I think that was one piece. And then something else that I think was helpful is I went for 1,000 coffees, like anyone I could talk to get their insights and recommendations and advice, like anyone who would give me time. And of course, we didn't necessarily adopt everyone's recommendations. People had so many different perspectives based on their own experience. But ultimately, the direction we went was some combination of all of that advice. And I think that was really helpful. I think right in the beginning, we were so afraid to tell too many people about our idea because we had this fear, like, what if someone takes it and they start doing what we're doing? But someone early on gave the advice that the chances of that are happening are so low. Like, you need to find the person, you need to accidentally talk to the person with that passion, that expertise, who's in that moment in their career and personal life, who is about to take a leap and start. Like, it takes so much and so many stars to align to want to start that business. You have to get very, very unlucky to talk to the person who's going to take that idea from you. And I think most people just want to chat and share their own expertise. So we really left our personal network and kind of friends of friends and try to get as much advice as we could, like trying not to reinvent the wheels ourselves, like have someone who could help guide us and shape, from their own experience.
Great insights as well, especially when you first started out. You have to go on 1,000 coffees, really have to network and meet people in person. The more hands you shake, the more clients, engage with. So right on. Now let's think about possible future here. What leadership challenges do you foresee coming over the next 1 to 2 years, at least the most common ones?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think is really interesting, like I'm going to talk a little bit about the other side of our business and our individual coaching, is that compensation has been so variable in the last couple of years. Like, we had a lot of fear at the start of the pandemic, and then we had some of the highest inflated salaries and titles that we've ever seen. And then we saw recessions and cutbacks and massive layoffs. And so in the last 6 years, compensation has changed so much. And so I think the challenge in the next 2 years is really seeing some of the corrections from organizational side, because there was also the challenge where there was a loyalty tax for some employees who had stayed with their companies, and new folks were coming in with really inflated salaries because that was what the market was demanding at the time and how they could correct for that. But now, with a lot of those layoffs, some of that has been corrected now, but it is, yeah, I think a lot of uncertainty. And I think right now too, because we've had quite a lot of economic uncertainty, then and a lot going on from the global stage, I think people are sometimes afraid to negotiate in a way that they might have done a couple of years ago. So I think I see that as a big challenge right now, people being afraid to ask and have the conversation, when I think, to be honest, negotiation can always be a really positive conversation. It's just about the way you frame it and how you bring it up. But I think it's always okay to ask the question.
Framing is vitally important. 100%.
Yes.
Sophie, where can they find you if they wanted to explore your work further?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can always connect with us on Instagram at thethoughtful.co, or on LinkedIn at thethoughtfulco, or on our website, you guessed it, thethoughtfulco.net.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining the show. A lot of insights you gave. We appreciate you. Audience, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Jordan.